I was 68 when my world shattered. It was July 4th, 2024, my birthday, a day I'd planned with the kind of care you pour into something sacred. I'd spent decades building this life in Maplewood, New Jersey, in a two-story house with ivy climbing the brick and a creaky porch swing. My late husband, George, hung when we moved in 30 years ago. George passed 5 years back, his heart giving out too soon, leaving me to carry on alone. I'd worked as a school librarian, shelving stories and guiding kids through books, until the district slashed funding last year, forcing me into retirement at 67. The loss of my job stung, not just for the income but for the purpose it gave me. Still, I had my home, my savings, and my family, or so I thought. That night, I'd set out to celebrate with my son Michael, his wife Sarah, and my lifelong friend Clara. I'd hung fairy lights in the dining room, baked my famous lemon cake, and polished the oak table George and I had refinished together. I expected warmth, maybe even gratitude. Instead, I got a knife in the back. The evening started wrong. Michael and Sarah arrived late, the tires of their SUV crunching the gravel driveway well after 7. Michael's face was tight, his jaw set like he was chewing on something bitter. Sarah, always glued to her phone, barely glanced up as she stepped inside, her heels clicking on the hardwood. Clara, who'd been my rock since we were girls sharing secrets in high school, was oddly quiet, clutching her purse like it might run off. I brushed it off. Maybe they were tired, I told myself. Life's busy, especially for Michael and Sarah, with their 2 kids and their endless complaints about money. I'd helped them out more times than I could count, dipping into my savings for their mortgage, their car repairs. Clara too had been struggling, and I'd trusted her with access to my accounts for a safe investment she'd pitched weeks ago. I wanted to believe they valued me, that family meant something. I was wrong. We sat down to dinner, the table glowing under the soft flicker of candles. I'd made George's favorite roast, the kind that filled the house with the smell of rosemary and comfort. I raised my glass of Merlot, smiling despite the tension. To family, I said, my voice steady, to being together. Michael snorted, a sharp, ugly sound that cut through the room. Family? He said, leaning back in his chair, his eyes narrow. Mom, let's be real, you're useless now. No job, no purpose, just sitting in this big house we could use. It's time you moved out. The words landed like a fist to my chest. Useless. Move out. From the home I'd paid for with years of overtime, where I'd rocked him to sleep as a baby, where I'd grieved George alone. Sarah smirked, her fingers still scrolling on her phone. Clara stared at her plate, her knuckles white around her fork. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to stay calm. Michael, I said, what do you mean, move out? He didn't hesitate. This house is too much for you. Sarah and I need the space for the kids. You're just in the way, in the way. Each word was a betrayal, stripping away the love I'd poured into him. Sarah finally looked up, her voice cool. A retirement home would be better for you, Eleanor. You'd be comfortable. Comfortable, as if I were a piece of furniture to be stored. Clara said nothing, her silence louder than any word. I wanted to scream, to demand respect, but I saw their faces cold, calculated, and knew arguing wouldn't change them. I excused myself to the kitchen, gripping the counter to steady my shaking hands. The heartbreak was raw, a wound I couldn't bandage, but beneath it, a spark of defiance flickered. They thought I was weak, finished. They were wrong. Dinner ended in a blur. Michael and Sarah left abruptly, saying they'd talk later. Claire lingered, offering a quick, awkward hug before hurrying out the door, her purse still clutched tight. I cleaned up alone, the clink of dishes echoing in the quiet house. At midnight, my phone buzzed, shattering the silence. A bank alert. I opened it, and my heart stopped. My savings account, $120,000, scraped together over decades of careful budgeting, was empty. A transfer authorized by Clara, marked as an investment. I called her, my fingers fumbling. Her phone was off. I called again, then texted, my panic rising. Nothing. My best friend, the woman who'd stood by me at George's funeral, had stolen my security and vanished. My son had thrown me out, My friend had robbed me blind, and I was alone in the house I might lose. I sank onto the couch, the weight of their betrayal crushing me. Tears came, hot and heavy, but as I stared at the walls George and I had painted, that spark of defiance grew. I wasn't useless. I wasn't done. Then I remembered something. George's cameras. After a break-in years ago, he'd installed hidden security cameras around the house. Tiny lenses tucked into the living room, kitchen and hallway. Just in case, he'd said, showing me the app to access them. I'd forgotten until now. The memory, a lifeline in the dark. My hands trembled as I grabbed my laptop, praying the system still worked. The app loaded, and the cameras blinked to life, holding footage from the past month. I didn't know what I'd find, but I knew one thing. Michael and Clara had underestimated me, and they'd pay for it. The morning after my 68th birthday, I woke with a fire in my gut, the kind that burns through despair and leaves something harder in its place. My house, my sanctuary, felt different now, too quiet, the air heavy with the sting of Michael's words and Clara's theft. I stood in the kitchen, the scent of last night's rosemary roast, lingering faintly, and stared at the spot where my son had called me useless. My hands still shook from the bank alert that confirmed Clara had drained my $120,000 savings. But I wasn't broken. Not yet. I had George's cameras, and they were about to change everything. Where are you reading from? Drop a comment below. Let's see how this unfolds together. I brewed a pot of coffee, the familiar gurgle of the machine grounding me as I set my laptop on the oak table. The house was still, the fairy lights from last night unplugged, their sparkle gone. George had installed those hidden cameras years ago, after a neighbor's garage was broken into. Better safe than sorry, he'd said, his calloused hands showing me the app on his old phone. I hadn't touched it since he died, but now it was my lifeline. I opened the app, my fingers clumsy with nerves, and held my breath as it connected. The screen flickered, and there they were, tiny lenses in the living room, kitchen, and hallway, silently recording for weeks. My heart pounded. What had they caught? I started with the footage from my birthday dinner. The living room camera showed Michael and Sarah arriving, their voices low as they stood by the fireplace before joining me at the table. I turned up the volume, and Michael's words hit like a fresh wound. "She's got to go," he said, his tone cold as ice. "This house is worth a fortune. We sell it, we're set." Sarah nodded, her lips curling. "She's got no fight left. Easy, easy. My own son plotting to take my home, not for his kids like he'd claimed, but for money." My chest tightened, the betrayal sharper now that I saw it laid bare. They hadn't just disrespected me, they'd planned to erase me. I scrolled back further, to a clip from 3 days ago in the kitchen. Clara sat at my table, her purse on her lap, speaking softly into her phone. I leaned closer, straining to hear. "The transfer's set," she said, her voice steady. "She trusts me completely. By Friday, it's ours." Friday, my birthday. Ours? Who was she working with? The footage didn't show her contact, but it was enough to make my stomach churn. Clara, my friend of 40 years, who'd cried with me at George's funeral, who'd shared countless cups of tea in this very kitchen, had been scheming to steal my life's work. I paused the video, her face frozen on the screen, and felt the heartbreak shift into something else, rage, yes, but also clarity. They thought I was a mark, an old woman they could push aside. They were about to learn otherwise. I spent hours combing through the footage, each clip a new cut to the heart. A week ago, Michael had met a realtor in my driveway, pointing at the house like it was already his. "My mom's getting old," he said, his voice dripping with fake concern. "She can't manage it. We'll take over soon." The realtor nodded, handing him a card. Another clip showed Sarah texting someone in my living room, muttering, "Once she's out, we can flip it fast." Flip my home, the place where I'd bandaged Michael's scraped knees, where George and I had danced to old jazz records on rainy nights. My eyes burned, but I didn't cry. Tears wouldn't help me now. Clara's betrayal ran deeper. A clip from 2 weeks back showed her rifling through my desk when I was out gardening, copying down my bank details. She'd been so convincing when she pitched that safe investment, her eyes warm as she talked about our future. I'd trusted her, handed over access like a fool. The footage didn't lie though, her calculated moves, her whispered calls to an unknown partner, maybe someone overseas. My savings were likely gone, funneled to an account I couldn't trace. The weight of it all, my son's greed, my friend's deceit, threatened to crush me, but that spark of defiance from last night flared brighter. I wasn't just a victim, I had proof, and I'd use it. I called Diane, my lawyer from book club, a woman with a sharp mind and a no-nonsense streak. She arrived within the hour, her silver hair pulled back, her eyes narrowing as I showed her the footage. "Eleanor, this is dynamite," she said, scribbling notes. "Michael's coercion, Clara's fraud, it's all here. We can go after them for theft, maybe even elder abuse." Elder abuse. The term made my skin crawl, but it fit. "What do you want?" Diane asked, her pen pausing. "Justice, revenge, or both?" I didn't have an answer yet. Part of me wanted to see them beg, to feel the shame they'd tried to heap on me. But another part, the one that still remembered Michael's toddler giggles and Clara's old kindness, hesitated. Could I destroy them? I poured Diane a coffee, the mug warm in my hand. "I want my life back," I said finally. "My home, my savings, my dignity." She nodded, her face softening. "Then we start with the evidence. Freeze what's left of your accounts, track Clara, confront Michael, but you need to decide how far you're willing to go." I looked around my kitchen, at the chipped teapot George loved, the window where I'd watched spring bloom for decades. This was my place, my strength. Michael and Clara had tried to take it, but I wasn't useless. I was Eleanor, and I was fighting back. The cameras had given me the truth, and now I'd use it to reclaim what was mine. The days after uncovering the camera footage felt like walking a tightrope. Part of me wanted to scream, to hurl every hurt back at Michael and Clara, but another part needed to be smart, to play this right. My home in Maplewood, with its ivy-covered walls and a porch swing creaking in the July breeze, was my anchor. I'd lost my savings, my son's respect, and my best friend's loyalty, but I hadn't lost myself. The footage was my weapon, hard evidence of their schemes, and I was ready to use it. Diane, my lawyer, had a glint in her eye when we planned the confrontation. "They'll squirm," she said, and I believed her. "Where are you reading from? Share below, let's see how this showdown unfolds." Diane and I spent 2 days preparing. First, we contacted my bank to freeze what little remained in my accounts. A few $100s in checking, nothing compared to the $120,000 Clara had siphoned off. The bank flagged the transfer as suspicious, and Diane got the police involved, tracing Clara to a budget hotel in Philadelphia. She hadn't fled the country yet, but her plane ticket suggested she planned to soon. Michael, meanwhile, was clueless, sending me curt texts. "Mom, we need to talk about the house. Retirement home brochures are in the mail." The nerve of him, acting like he'd already won. I played along, replying, "Let's meet to discuss options." He thought I was folding. He had no idea I was setting a trap. We arranged the meeting for Saturday afternoon in my dining room, the same place where Michael had called me useless. I spent the morning cleaning, not because I cared what they thought, but because it steadied me. I polished the oak table, set out a pitcher of iced tea, and tested the laptop to ensure the footage would play smoothly. My heart pounded, but it wasn't fear, it was anticipation. Diane would be there for backup, waiting in the kitchen until I needed her. I wanted them to see me first, to think they still had the upper hand. The fairy lights from my birthday were still up, their soft glow a bitter reminder of that night's betrayal. I wore my favorite blue dress, the one George always said brought out my eyes. This was my home, my fight, and I'd face them on my terms. Clara arrived first, her face pale, her purse clutched tight like it was her lifeline. She hesitated at the door, her eyes darting to the corners of the room. "Eleanor," she started, her voice shaky. "I'm so glad you called. I've been worried. Worried. I wanted to laugh, but I just nodded, gesturing to a chair. Michael and Sarah swept in minutes later, all confidence as if they owned the place. Michael's suit was crisp, his smile forced. Sarah's heels clicked as she sat, her phone nowhere in sight for once. "So Mom," Michael said, leaning forward, "have you thought about what we discussed?" Moving out, his tone was patronizing, like I was a child. I smiled, pouring iced tea, my hands steady despite the storm inside. "Oh, I've thought about a lot," I said. "Let's talk about trust first." I opened my laptop, the screen casting a glow across the table. "Before we discuss the house," I said, "I want you to see something." I pressed play, and the living room footage filled the screen. Michael and Sarah by the fireplace, his voice clear. "She's got to go. This house is worth a fortune." Sarah's nod, her smug "she's got no fight left." Their faces froze, Michael's mouth half open, Sarah's eyes wide. I switched to Clara's clip, her voice whispering into her phone. "The transfer's set. She trusts me. By Friday it's ours." Clara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. The room was silent except for the hum of the laptop. I let the moments stretch, their guilt laid bare. "You set us up," Michael exploded, slamming his fist on the table, making the glasses rattle. I didn't flinch. "No," I said, my voice calm but steel-edged. "You betrayed me, and I have it all on tape." Sarah's face crumpled, her bravado gone. Clara sobbed, her words tumbling out. "Eleanor, I was desperate. My debts, I didn't mean to hurt you. Didn't mean to." She'd stolen my life savings. Michael stammered. "Mom, I was stressed, okay? I didn't mean it." I leaned forward, meeting his eyes. "You called me useless, you tried to take my home, and you," I turned to Clara, "you took everything I worked for. Did you think I'd just let it go?" Diane stepped in from the kitchen, her presence like a storm cloud. "I've seen the footage," she said, her voice sharp. "Michael, Sarah, you've coerced Eleanor into leaving her property. Clara, you've committed fraud. The police are already tracking you." Clara's sobs grew louder, but I felt no pity. I laid out my terms. Clara would return whatever she could of my savings, or face charges. Michael and Sarah would drop their claim on my house, or I'd send the footage to their friends, their boss, their entire social circle. "You thought I was weak," I said, standing now, my voice rising, "but I'm the one in control here." Michael's face reddened, but he said nothing. Sarah stared at the floor. Clara clutched her purse, trembling. As they left, the weight of their betrayal lingered like a bruise. I'd exposed them, but the heartbreak wasn't gone. Michael was my son, Clara my oldest friend. Could I really destroy them? Diane squeezed my shoulder. "You did good, Eleanor. Now what?" I looked around my dining room, at the table where I'd fed my family, the walls holding decades of memories. I wasn't just fighting for my house, I was fighting for myself. The cameras had given me power, and I wasn't done using it. But first, I needed to know how far I was willing to go. The confrontation left my dining room feeling like a battlefield, the air thick with the echoes of Michael's anger and Clara's sobs. I stood by the window watching their cars disappear down the gravel driveway, the fairy lights casting faint shadows on the walls. I'd won the moment, exposed their betrayal with George's cameras, but victory didn't feel like I'd imagined. My heart ached for the son I'd raised and the friend I'd trusted, even as my defiance burned brighter than ever. They thought they could break me, but I was still here, in my home, holding the truth. Now they were begging, and I had to decide what came next. Where are you reading from? Drop a comment. Let's see how this choice unfolds. The days that followed were a blur of phone calls and guilt trips. Michael called first, his voice softer than I'd heard in years. "Mom, I messed up," he said, the words catching like he was fighting tears. "I was stressed. Work, the kids, money. I didn't mean it. I need you, need me." The same man who'd called me useless now wanted my forgiveness, as if words could erase his plot to take my home. Sarah sent letters, her handwriting neat, but her tone hollow. "We were misguided, Eleanor. We want to make this right." Misguided, a polite word for scheming to sell my house out from under me. Clara was the worst. Her voicemails were frantic, promising to return what she could of my $120,000. "I was drowning in debt," she said. I didn't know what else to do. I listened to each message, my coffee growing cold on the kitchen counter, and felt the weight of their pleas. But the heartbreak hadn't faded, and neither had my resolve. Diane pushed me to stay firm. We met at a cafe in town, the clatter of dishes and the hum of conversation, a welcome distraction. "They're scared, Eleanor," she said, stirring sugar into her tea. "You've got them cornered with that footage. Clara's theft is criminal, and Michael's coercion could land him in court. Don't let their apologies sway you." She was right, but it wasn't that simple. Michael was my son, the boy who'd clung to my hand during thunderstorms. Clara had been there when George died, holding me as I sobbed. Could I really burn those bridges? I sipped my latte, staring at the steam curling up, and thought of George. He'd been gentle but fierce when it came to protecting us. He'd have fought for me, and I owed it to myself to do the same. I agreed to meet Clara at the police station, where Diane had arranged for her to turn over what was left of my savings. She looked smaller than I remembered, her eyes red-rimmed, her coat wrinkled. "Eleanor, I'm so sorry," she said, sliding a folder across the table. It held bank records, and a cashier's check for $80,000, most of my money, but not all. The police had tracked another $30,000 to an offshore account, recovered through a sting operation Diane had pushed for. The rest was gone, spent or hidden by Clara's mysterious investor. She swore she'd pay the rest over time, her voice breaking. "You were my family," I said, my tone steady despite the ache in my chest. "And you chose greed over me." She flinched, tears spilling, but I felt no urge to comfort her. Her shame was her burden now, not mine. I didn't press charges. Diane thought it was enough that Clara's reputation in Maplewood was ruined. She'd leave town soon, and I'd never have to see her again. Michael was harder. I met him at the house, just the two of us on a rainy afternoon. The porch swing creaked as we sat, the drizzle pattering on the roof. He looked tired, his shoulders slumped. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said. "I was wrong. I'll stop pushing about the house. Can we start over?" I wanted to believe him, to see the boy who'd drawn me lopsided hearts for Mother's Day, but the footage replayed in my mind, his cold voice plotting to sell my home. "You called me useless," I said, my voice low. "You tried to take everything I built. Why should I trust you now?" He looked away, rain streaking the windows. "Because I'm your son," he said, almost a whisper. The words stung, but they didn't erase the betrayal. I told him he could visit, but the house was mine. Trust would have to be earned, step by painful step. I spent evenings in my garden, tending George's roses, their thorns a reminder that beauty could still cut. The heartbreak lingered, Michael's cruelty, Clara's theft, but it no longer ruled me. Diane helped me secure my finances, setting up new accounts and a trust to protect my home. I updated my will, leaving the house to a local charity if I passed, ensuring Michael could never claim it. The cameras stayed on, a silent guard in case I needed them again. As I knelt in the dirt, the scent of roses heavy in the air, I felt ashamed. I wasn't just fighting for my house, I was fighting for my dignity, my independence. Michael and Clara had tried to strip that away, but I was stronger than they thought. By the time the roses bloomed brighter, I was starting to feel like myself again, not the mother or friend they'd betrayed, but Eleanor, 68 and unyielding. Their pleas had shaken me, but they hadn't broken me. I'd lost some of my savings, but I'd gained something more: control over my life. The question now was how to move forward, not just with them, but with the woman I was becoming. Spring came to Maplewood, and with it a quiet strength I hadn't felt in years. The roses in my garden bloomed fiercer than ever, their petals a bold red against a green, as if they knew I'd fought to stay in this home. Michael's betrayal, Clara's theft, the sting of being called useless, they still lingered, like shadows in the corners of my mind. But I wasn't that woman standing on the porch with a suitcase anymore, reeling from their cruelty. George's cameras had given me the truth, and I'd used it to take back my life. Now at 68 I was building something new, not just a home, but a legacy. Where are you reading from? Share below and let's keep this story alive. The months after the confrontation were a slow unraveling of the past. Michael visited sparingly, his visits awkward but civil. He'd bring coffee, sit on the porch swing, and talk about his kids. My grandkids, who I hadn't seen much since the fallout. They miss you, Mom, he'd say, his eyes searching mine for a crack in my resolve. I wanted to see them, to braid Lily's hair or read to Ethan like I used to, but trust was a fragile thing. Bring them next time, I told him one chilly March afternoon, the air sharp with the promise of spring. But you and I, we're not there yet, he nodded, his jaw tight, and left without arguing. It wasn't forgiveness, not fully, but it was a door left ajar. I'd loved him too long to close it completely, but he'd have to earn his way back. Clara was gone for good. Word around town was she'd moved to a small apartment in upstate New York, her name whispered with pity or scorn at the grocery store. She'd sent one last letter, promising to pay back the remaining $10,000 of my savings, but I didn't hold my breath. The $110,000 I'd recovered, thanks to Diane and the police, was enough to secure my future, though the loss still stung. I saw her face in my dreams sometimes, laughing over tea in my kitchen, but then I'd wake to the reality of her betrayal. I didn't hate her, I pitied her. She'd traded our friendship for a scheme that left her alone. That was punishment enough. Diane became more than a lawyer, she was a friend, a lifeline. We'd meet at my house, sipping wine by the fireplace, and she'd push me to think beyond survival. You're not just Eleanor the victim, she said one evening, her glass catching the firelight. You're Eleanor the fighter. What do you want now? The question stuck with me. I'd spent so long defining myself as a mother, a wife, a friend, that I'd forgotten what I wanted for me. So I started small. I volunteered at the library, shelving books and reading to kids. The smell of old pages, bringing back my old spark. I joined a book club, not just as a member but as a host. My dining room filled with new voices and laughter. The fairy lights stayed up, a reminder of the night I'd almost lost everything, but also of how far I'd come. I fortified my home, too. Diane helped me update my will, leaving the house to a local children's charity if I passed, ensuring Michael could never claim it. The cameras stayed on, their tiny lenses a quiet reassurance. I'd check the app occasionally, not out of paranoia but as a habit, like locking the door at night. My finances were locked down, new accounts set up with safeguards Clara could never have breached. I even planted more roses in the garden, their roots digging deep into the earth. George and I had worked together, each bloom felt like a promise to him, to myself, that I wouldn't be pushed out again. One evening in April, I sat on the porch, a mug of chamomile tea, warming my hands. The swing creaked under me, the same rhythm it had for decades. The street was quiet, the maples budding green under the street lights. I thought of Michael, his halting apologies, and Clara, her desperate pleas. The heartbreak hadn't vanished, it probably never would, but it no longer defined me. I'd lost a son's respect and a friend's loyalty, but I'd gained something more, myself. At 68, I was no longer just surviving. I was living fiercely on my terms. The cameras had shown me their truth, but they'd also shown me mine. I was capable, not useless, and no one could take that away. I looked out at the garden, the roses swaying in the breeze, and felt George's presence, like a hand on my shoulder. He'd have been proud, I thought, of the fight I'd fought, the life I was building. To anyone reading this, know this: betrayal cuts deep, but it doesn't have to break you. You can lose what you thought was yours, family, trust, security, and still find your way back. I did. I'm unbreakable, and this house, this life, is mine. Where are you reading from? Drop a comment below, and let's share this journey together.